Okay, let's add some UI input here. And I'll use the input action I set up. I don't really need all this pointer stuff though. Wait, why does Gamepad only have move, submit, and cancel? That's really fucking limited. Let's check out the docs. Okay, we can create a custom input module. That looks easy enough. Guess we'll try that out. Hi, I'm BGK of Pear Tree Games, and this is creating a Gamepad UI input module in Unity. The new input system for Unity is really fantastic. It provides a lot of flexibility, comes with a huge amount of built-in features, and best of all, is easily extendable. And when coupled with the UI event system, it provides a really quick setup to control all of your UI with the input system UI input module. The module has great keyboard and mouse input with basic functionality for gamepads, but when I started to expand on the input for gamepads, I found it a bit awkward. So I decided to try and create my own module to capture all button presses in each phase and send them to the appropriate handlers. Before we dive into coding our own solution, if you aren't familiar with the UI event system, I'd recommend taking a read over the official documentation shown earlier. There's only 4 pages with a few paragraphs each. Okay. The general flow of what we're trying to achieve is when an input action event happens, we'll notify our module, which will then pass that on to the event system if there is a currently selected game object. The event system will then check for any event system handlers on those mono behaviors, and if none are found, it'll bubble up the hierarchy until it finds one or reaches a root scene object. If it does find one, it'll just call the appropriate function. Just a note, it doesn't have to bubble up, but I find it's a very useful functionality and doesn't have much impact on performance. To start, we're going to extend the base event data to add the button phase. I prefer to have a single event with all phases and let the listener decide how to react to each phase individually. Next, we're going to create all of our event system handlers. The first 2 are just recreations of the submit and cancel handlers, but with our new button event data. I'm also adding handlers for menu, options, triggers, and bumpers. If we look at the execute event script, we can get a sense of how Unity implements their executions. We'll create an event function for each event system handler. One thing to note is usually handlers aren't tied to button mappings like bumper, but actions like tab change. But to keep this more generic, I'm keeping the mappings, but know it's only a placeholder for any action regardless of what mapping it's bound to. Okay, let's get started on our module. For the navigation, I'm pretty much just modifying the navigation logic from the Input System module. Unfortunately, the navigation model struct they use is internal, so we'll have to duplicate it here. Pretty much, we mark the current selected game object with the selection handler, check our movement input, and throttle any movement if we've changed selection recently already. Otherwise, we send a move event. Next, we're going to make all of our fields for the input actions. For each of the actions, we'll enable them and listen to the events. There's an important bit here that Unity's input module tracks callbacks and makes sure not to disable input action assets which are part of the module, but we're not bothering with that. So if you use the same input action elsewhere and disable it, it will turn off here as well, so be careful with that. Okay, now we need to just make our callbacks, which call the event system. I do use execute rather than execute hierarchy here, but I changed that later. I thought about having it as an option per input action, but that doesn't seem worth the trouble. And we want to make sure to disable and remove our listeners when our module is disabled. Let's also make sure we select our default game object if set when the module activates. Okay, this is looking good. The input system has a nicer drop-down selection for your events, and if you've seen my other videos, you know I love drop-downs, so I think we'll create that as well. Since there's not much to mention here, I wanted to say that even if this exact system isn't useful for you, I hope the takeaway is that since Unity moved to packages, everything is pretty much on GitHub and written in C#, so it can easily be modified to suit your needs. Don't be afraid to mess with the official stuff, dig around, and see how they do things. Okay, nice. Since the names include slashes, we automatically get groupings in the drop-down field too. Let's select our actions. And to test this out, we'll make a debug script which implements all of the event system handlers and just outputs a log. Now, we'll add that to the first selection only, so it should log out when we press any button while load game is selected, and not when any other selection is selected. It works. You can't tell, but I'm also pressing buttons on the other selections. But I want to bubble up any event to any parent event system handlers, so let's change our method call and test that out too. Easy. And now with the debug on our background, we can see the calls from other selections bubble up. So with that, we can add event handlers like bumper handlers for tab changes or menu handlers for closing the menu directly on our menus, and they'll be called if the current game object selection is a child of the menu itself. That's all for this video, and I hope you found something useful. Thanks so much for watching.